Trump says Hamas has agreed to disarm. Hamas says, not so fast. Israel says the deal still isn't good enough. After nearly 2 years of war, a historic agreement is being celebrated and questioned at the very same moment. Is this the beginning of peace, or just another ceasefire headline waiting to collapse? The United States says mediators meeting in Cairo have reached a phased agreement aimed at the complete disarmament of Hamas and all other armed groups in Gaza. The talks involved representatives from Hamas alongside mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, as part of President Donald Trump's wider Gaza peace initiative. Announcing the development on social media, Trump declared that his Board of Peace had secured a historic agreement for the complete disarmament of Hamas.
Today, the Board of Peace reached a historic agreement for the complete disarmament of Hamas and all other armed groups in Gaza. This is a monumental step toward lasting peace and security. This agreement is a critical step towards Gaza finally being governed by a new Palestinian government that will work closely with the Board of Peace to help the Palestinian people. At the same time, Israel will have the security it deserves, with Gaza no longer used as a base for terror attacks.
However, the optimism was quickly tempered. A Hamas source told Reuters the agreement remains only a draft. According to the source, heavy weapons would be placed under the control of a future Palestinian administration rather than handed over to Israel. Ghazi Hamad, a member of the Hamas negotiating team, told Al Jazeera,
"We will not take any action regarding disarmament prior to Israel's withdrawal from the Strip."
Meanwhile, a US official on Thursday shared his suspicions regarding Hamas with reporters.
Israel is very skeptical that Hamas will disarm. We're not asking Israel to do anything that isn't in the 20-point plan that they agreed to initially, and so we're very confident they will adhere to it. If they don't, President Trump would be very, very disappointed. We believe that they'll continue to be a good partner in this and comply.
At the same time, Israeli officials voiced strong reservations. An Israeli official said the proposed 15-point framework failed to meet Israel's core demand for the complete demilitarization of Gaza. Israel maintains that Hamas must surrender all weapons and militant infrastructure before any Israeli military withdrawal can begin. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government raised these objections recently to Board of Peace envoy Tony Blair, the Israeli official said in a statement, without specifying its issues with the disarmament proposal.
There will be no IDF withdrawal from the Yellow Line in the Gaza Strip before Hamas is disarmed and the Strip is fully demilitarized.
Under the proposed framework, Israeli forces would gradually withdraw as disarmament progresses, while an international stabilization force and a new Palestinian police force would assume responsibility for security. The plan also includes dismantling tunnels, weapons stockpiles, and arms production facilities, alongside a major increase in humanitarian aid and the reconstruction of Gaza under the supervision of the Board of Peace. Meanwhile, a senior US official told reporters during a briefing call that Iran reportedly tried to convince Hamas not to accept the Board of Peace's disarmament proposal, but ultimately failed in that effort.
Iran would have liked Hamas not to do the deal, but Iran abandoned Hamas a while ago. They can't afford to keep them going, and I think the Hamas guys realize that they have to do what's best for themselves and for the people.
Despite the diplomatic momentum, violence has not stopped. Health officials in Gaza said Israeli strikes on Thursday killed at least 6 Palestinians, including 2 children, while the Israeli military said it had targeted Hamas militants. For now, the announcement represents the most ambitious diplomatic proposal since the war began. But with Hamas demanding Israeli withdrawal first, Israel insisting on complete disarmament before making concessions, and fighting continuing on the ground, whether this agreement becomes a genuine roadmap to peace or another stalled proposal remains uncertain. According to a report by an Israeli publication, Palestinian sources familiar with the negotiations have claimed that Hamas is expected to soon announce that it has agreed in principle to disarm and hand over its heavy weapons to a third party. The proposed arrangement would cover Hamas's heavy weapons and could also include the transfer of parts of its tunnel network and weapons production facilities to the Technocratic Palestinian Committee, also known as NCAG.
How the handover would be implemented remains unclear, as do the categories of weapons it would cover and its overall scope. The sides have yet to reach a final agreement, and discussions are continuing over the definition of the weapons to be covered by the arrangement.
The sources said Hamas representatives reached the understanding during talks with Egyptian intelligence officials in Cairo, where the issue of disarmament was the central focus of the discussions. The negotiations were held as part of broader efforts to advance indirect talks with Israel under US President Donald Trump's proposed plan for post-war Gaza. However, the sources cautioned that key details remain unresolved, including how the handover would be implemented, which categories of weapons would be covered, and the overall scope of the agreement. Reportedly, no final deal has been reached, and negotiations are continuing over the terms of the proposed arrangement. However, according to Palestinian sources, one of the main sticking points in the talks is determining exactly which weapon systems Hamas would be required to surrender. The current discussions are focused primarily on heavy and strategic military capabilities, including long-range rockets, heavy mortars, anti-tank missiles, and other advanced weapons, along with weapons manufacturing sites, storage facilities, and parts of Hamas's tunnel network. Hamas is resisting broader language such as resistance infrastructure, arguing that the term could also include civilian or dual-use facilities. Instead, the group is pushing for definitions that clearly distinguish military assets from civilian infrastructure. Alongside the disarmament issue, Palestinian sources in Gaza and Cairo say Hamas is also seeking guarantees that its civil servants would be integrated into the new administrative structure expected to govern the Gaza Strip. The sources stress that no final agreement has been reached and negotiations remain ongoing over the scope of the proposed weapons handover, implementation mechanisms, and future governance arrangements. Hamas has maintained authority over western and central Gaza through its internal security apparatus, including the Arrow unit, which has allegedly carried out public executions of suspected collaborators, targeted beatings of rivals, and crackdowns on competing clans. The reported negotiations come as Israel prepares to launch a pilot program to relocate tens of thousands of Gazans into temporary housing inside an Israeli-controlled security zone, a move intended to facilitate stabilization efforts while reducing Hamas's influence over the civilian population. Earlier, Israel's Security Cabinet approved the deployment of an international stabilization force to Gaza, expected to include around 200 personnel from what officials described as friendly countries. Now will these negotiations bear any real results? Or the plight of the Palestinians continues, remains to be seen.